The secrecy of the appointments, to quote the report, undermined public confidence in government and, to quote again, once the appointments became known, the secrecy with which they had been surrounded was corrosive of trust in government. We're shining sunlight on a shadow government that preferred to operate in darkness, a government that operated in a cult of secrecy and a culture of cover-up, which arrogantly dismissed scrutiny from the Parliament and the public as a mere inconvenience, a government whose motto was nothing to see here. The actions of the former Prime Minister were extraordinary, they were unprecedented, and they were wrong. Mr Morrison did not agree to meet with Virginia Bell and communicated only through his lawyers. That contradicts the very clear statement that Scott Morrison said when this inquiry was announced. The explanation given for the first two appointments was in case the relevant minister became incapacitated in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. But Ms Bell has found that the appointments were unnecessary, as an acting minister could have been appointed if needed, to quote the report, in a matter of minutes. We all know that that is the case. The latter three appointments, DISA, Home Affairs and Treasury, to quote the report, had little connection to the pandemic and were made because of Scott Morrison's concern that, again I quote the report, an incumbent minister might exercise his or her statutory powers in a matter with which Mr Morrison didn't agree. Scott Morrison also sought advice at the same time on being appointed to administer the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, but ultimately decided not to proceed. Ms Bell confirms that none of the relevant ministers were informed at the time of the appointment. The Ministers for Home Affairs and the Treasurer did not learn of the appointments until the revelations post the election. The Department Secretaries of Health, Finance, Home Affairs and Treasury were not informed. Neither was the Chief Medical Officer. Ms Bell and other senior public servants quoted in the report described Scott Morrison's appointments in a range of ways. One of the clear quotes is, "It was an exorbitant grab by Morrison and Parliament couldn't hold him to account." It's described as bizarre, extremely irregular, unusual and constituting a serious deficiency in governance arrangements. When it comes to the government's response to this report, I will recommend to the meeting of Cabinet next week that our government implement all 6 recommendations of the Bell inquiry to restore the Australian people's faith in our democratic institutions.
Do you think that Scott Morrison should resign?
Well, I think that a whole lot of people have got to look at their behaviour in this. Scott Morrison clearly felt the confidence to be able to consider not that he was a part of a democratic government, not that he was bound by the conventions in which Parliament and government functions, but others were aware of this as well.